We have a question.
We do have an important question. One of the things that we do here in South Florida, I think there are two things at the local level you really can do in terms of how you can help make an impact as far as the climate is concerned. That is, work on a plastic ban. And one of the things that we're doing is building community gardens. If you can speak to the issue of factory farming, I think that probably is like community gardens can really help reduce the carbon footprint. In terms of factory farming, how much that has played a role in increasing our carbon footprint, maybe as much as anything.
Well, factory farming in general has got one advantage, and that is it was, when it was developed, highly productive, and that did the so-called green revolution at great ecological cost. Did allow more people to be fed, although fixing up distribution would have done a much better job. And I think that, in my point of view, the best thing about doing gardening and so on is, in part, it cuts the huge fossil fuel input, which makes the food system so bad from the point of view of the food system being able to operate in the right climate. But it also teaches people things. That is, if you've had a farm, if you've had a garden in New York City, say, and you planted palm trees in it, you found in the winter that the palm trees kind of disappeared. And that would bring to you the idea that actually, if you change the temperature, you're going to affect plants, and it's plants that we have to eat. So that changing the temperature rapidly is not a clever idea for a species that somebody called Homo sapiens, the wise man. Of course, clearly the women were the wise ones, but so I'm very much in favor of changing the agricultural system to a more ecologically sustainable one, and spreading agriculture over places, for example, where there are now lawns. I mean, in much of the United States, people take an exotic grass, a foreign grass, and grow it everywhere, rather than growing food or growing native plants that are part of ecosystems that we want to maintain because they support our lives. People don't understand that we are utterly dependent on what now finally ecologists are pointing out, and a few smart economists are taking up the idea of natural capital. That is, we are depleting our natural capital, which is our life support systems, which bring us fresh water, which bring us food, other little things like that we tend to like. And we are getting rid of it as fast as we can. It's as if we were the profligate son of a rich family who inherited a huge amount of money and discovered that he could write a bigger check every year and never look at the balance in his account. And the account is running dry. Good example is the pumping out of aquifers in places like Florida, particularly where when sea level rises, you're going to lose freshwater aquifers just from that. And you're going to lose agricultural land. But again, I don't like the emphasis on sea level rise. People can latch on to that, but the food situation is much more immediate and will be much more difficult to solve. You can always walk away from the sea level rise and build further inland. But if you haven't got food, you can't walk. So
no, it's true. One thing I wanted to ask you about, I was looking at the articles that you sent over, and a huge issue, and we've talked about it before, is biodiversity loss. And what that, it's like everything is connected. We all know everything. Well, not we all know, but I know that everything is connected. And so when you're talking about the extinction of like 1 million species and how that's connected to what we're doing. And I was just wondering if you could talk about that and how that's going to affect us. I mean, obviously, we know certain species, like obviously if there's no bees, we have a problem. But just in general, just loss of all of our critters.
Well, it's not just it is our critters, of course, because one of the things that's often missed in the discussion of sea level rise is the acidification of the oceans. And for most of us, seafood is very important. Most of us in rich countries, to have a healthy diet, a chunk of seafood is really important. But for many millions of people, it's life itself. In other words, the critical protein for many people, particularly in tropical areas and areas where there are coral reefs, it's artisanal fisheries on coral reefs that supply the critical protein to people. So one of the things we're doing, acidifying the oceans, which comes from putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We're taking past sunlight and using it now. And so that's a critical thing. Also, fresh water and the wetlands of the world are critical in many ways. The wetlands purify the water. Coastal wetlands are often the nurseries for fisheries that support everybody. The forests sequester carbon and change the climate. When people think about, well, who cares if the Amazon is cut down? Well, if I was going to show you out the window here, we have very heavy winds right now off and on in California. And of course, one of the things that's happening is we're changing the climate. There's more drought. And guess what? That leads to more and more intense forest fires. And
Of course.
November in 2019, Ann and our second home is in Australia. And we were in Sydney with the forests there burning, on getting the smoke. And then we came back to California, and California was burning. And that's going to get worse and worse and worse. And again, the biodiversity all ties into that. We are part of biodiversity. We depend on all the other organisms to create ecosystems in which human beings can survive and thrive. And wiping out a species is what people focus on, but it's, again, the wrong focus. Wiping out of populations, which precedes the species disappearing, is much more critical. For example, if we wiped out the honeybees in North America, it'd cost them, the last estimate I saw was $20 billion a year, and we'd have a much less nutritious diet. But the bees, if you wiped them out of North America, the species wouldn't have disappeared. It originated in the old world tropics. It's common in Africa. And so what we have to watch is the extermination of populations, and that's what we're seeing all over the place. Again, you young folks wouldn't know, but in Florida, if you drove at night 50 years ago and drove around fast, you'd have to stop the car every once in a while to wipe the bugs off the windshield.
Love bugs. We have love bugs. They're called love bugs.
Yeah. Well, I remember driving through the West in 1945, I think it was, and having to stop to pull the butterflies out of the radiator of the car. That's all gone. When I first went to Costa Rica to do field work 40 years ago, we used to be able to hang up a cloth, put a light on it, and get thousands of moths of hundreds of species coming to it. No more. In other words, we're wiping out the insects, but who cares about bugs? Well, the birds do, and the plants do. And if you like birds and you like plants and you like to eat plants, you want to have the bugs. It's a very complicated system. And of course, the ones that do the best are the ones that are least helpful to us. That is, the parts of biodiversity that thrive are, for example, the rodents like rats who carry our diseases. And the pests that attack our crops, because there are fewer. Because of the laws of thermodynamics, there are fewer things that eat crop pests than there are crop pests. And the smaller populations go first. And so you lose some of the control over the pests and you get less food. Everybody should be taught this stuff starting in middle school at the latest. But our educational system is totally broken. We have the pandemic illustrated that the average human being in North America, and certainly the average congressperson and politician in general, did not understand exponential growth. In other words, they'd say stupid things like, well, there's just 4 cases here. And the speed with which 4 cases can turn into 400,000 cases is almost instantaneous if you understand exponential growth. But people don't.
And this is why I'm not a politician, people, because I understand that. So,
speaking of politicians.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.